everyone, to our podcast today. Our guest is Marion from Florida. And, you know, corporate values are critical for any organization. Today, we are finding that employees are leaving organizations in droves. We're finding that it's very difficult for organizations to hire people. Right? They're scrambling to find people, whether you run a restaurant or whether you run an IT firm or corporate governments, you know, and on top of all of that, whatever is happening globally right now, we have a surplus of people who are my age, you know, we call ourselves the baby boomers, who are leaving. We're retiring. Right. So who's going to fill in that gap? And why are they going to fill in that gap? How are they going to fill in that gap? And I really feel personally that corporations need to clean up their values. They need to know what they stand for and how they are going to exhibit it. And then they need to really have conversations with their employees to say, these are the values that our company honors, and have a conversation with the employees and ask them, how would you like to exhibit the value of respect, for example? How will you respect your colleagues? How will you respect the leaders and clients and so on and so forth? So corporate values are really critical. So I am so excited, Marion, and I know Raj is too, to have this conversation with you around corporate values. So do share with our guests, what is your company's mission statement?
Thank you, Betska. I am really excited to be here and talking about this topic because business and the corporate environment has been for many, many years my daily life and the mission of my company, consulting in business management and leadership, particularly because it is such a timely topic. You talked about how companies are struggling to find quality employees. And just yesterday, I was part of a conversation. Actually, I was listening to a speaker and he shared that he drove by and McDonald's had a sign for $31 per hour, right? Like from, where was it before, like $8, $9. And I think we can agree that we are in a time where this is a timely topic. How do we treat our employees? How do we really leverage what they bring to the table? And how do we value them? And it comes back to those corporate values that we stand for, that we exhibit, that we really have throughout our organizations, our behaviors, and so forth. And so this topic in itself, I was just recently writing an article about emotional ties and beyond the financial incentive, because when we are looking at what attracts quality talent, it's not the same things as it used to be, or where the corporations were in charge and they decided how they would treat. People are in a position or demanding that they're treated a certain way. And the human element of it, I believe, is extremely important. And so you were asking me about my mission of the company. And so within that business management and leadership consulting business, I partner up with organizations and business leaders to help them reach their full potential, because my why deep down is to find better ways. I love to question the status quo. I love to gain clarity, putting the puzzle pieces together and helping them reach their potential. But the big difference here is that it all starts with the people inside the organization, every touch point. It's the teamwork, it's the collaboration, it's the alignment of values throughout the organization, every touch point of that. And I believe that is where we need to start.
That's outstanding. Thank you so much. So because we want to discuss corporate values today, perhaps you could explain to us what your corporate values are.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Yeah. It's values. We all have values, right? And it's not something that is good or bad. but we each have our own set of values that we believe or we exhibit. And throughout all these years that I've worked with leaders, either being part of executive leadership teams or being mentored by leaders earlier in my career, or now working with companies, the three values that I have found that are really making a huge difference is responsibility, integrity, and trust. Those are the three main ones that I am exhibiting in everything that I do, and that I've seen when leaders are putting a large emphasis on those values, things are different. Things are changing for the better within the organization. And perhaps we're starting with each one of these. What I'd love to talk a bit about what I mean by those values. Mm-hmm. The first one, really, it starts with trust, because I believe that reaching our full potential requires us to really speak up. And when do we speak up, or when do our employees speak up? It's when they've developed a certain level of trust, right? And when a leader has failed to create that trust, and that trust comes a lot of times from consistency. When you know what to expect, you know what a leader will do or what they stand for. And so when we are at that point where we're creating that trust, that takes care of a lot of the gossiping that's happening. Have you ever been in a company where people, everybody is perfectly happy or quiet, and then the person leaves and they start chatting in groups, or it's the gossip that constantly is going, it's ruining the culture of the organization. It's ruining the motivation and the performance and the belonging of the people within the organizations. And of course, that has an impact on the results. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things Raj mentioned before we started the recording was how organizations have these values, but they are not managing them correctly or leading them correctly to instill those values within themselves and within the employees themselves, getting the employees involved in all of this. And so if the values are not being exhibited at a heart level, it has to be owned from the heart, not just from the intellect, then of course what we're going to find, and we find this in every single country, including corporations and government, we see people doing unethical things, stealing. We're seeing corruption. We're seeing all kinds of tactics, because it's all about power for self versus the success of the organization as a whole. So my question to you is, in your experience, how do leaders build that trust? How do they do that?
So when we're talking about trust, especially out of all the values, it's not something that we force upon anybody, right? It comes down to how we behave on a consistent basis that builds that trust. And it's not necessarily something we just decide is happening, but that other people will give us, right? And if they feel like there's a certain level of corruption, or there is, I don't stand for what I said, or I keep changing what I say and what I do, that trust will never be built. And so that is critically important from that component, that, to your point, we are living what we are saying. We are communicating in a way where we are trustworthy, where we perhaps sometimes even let employees know that we don't have all the answers, right? We want their opinions. We want their buy-in. We want them to take accountability, and we have their back, and they're appreciated, and they're valued. And all of these activities will lead to a certain level of trust, but no doubt about it, it takes time. And depending on what culture you have, certain cultures that go by the motto of, I trust you until you prove me otherwise, right? Or you have more cultures that say, well, you need to deserve my trust. So that means you need to exhibit certain things before I even ever will start trusting you. And when we have experiences that we feel our trust was used, it's even more difficult to then overcome that and continue building on that trust. And that is true, I believe, in a personal setting, but especially in a corporate setting, when we have leaders or we're going through change and we are not sure whether or not we can trust.
So I heard you say quite a few things in there, including recognition. I heard communicating truth, right? Being honest. That would be part of that trust element. Actually, trust includes all the values when you think about it. You know, a leader being able to exhibit here in our company, we have 76 values that we encourage leaders to follow, and trust is a big one in there. But that the whole piece around being ethical in your business dealings, right, Raj?
Right.
Yeah, really being ethical, communicating truth, recognition. And one of the things that I'm constantly inviting leaders to think about is, what is their job? If you're a manager of people, or you're a manager of projects, you're a project leader, whatever, you're still engaging with a lot of people. What is your job? Well, your number one job as a leader is to create more leaders. So it's not about you, right? It is about you in terms of you being a great exhibitor of human values, but you are to be that role model for other people, for again, being ethical and being honest and having integrity and being a responsible leader, accepting. If you want someone to trust you, then you can't judge them.
You bring up the other values that I agree with you. They all tie together. They all build on each other. And when you're talking about integrity, what that means to me is doing the right thing, right? It might not be the easy thing. It might not be the thing that would bring us as a corporate team for the organization the biggest result or the biggest financial result, which is oftentimes a big target and a big goal. And that is part of the mission. And what I've experienced in corporations, when you do the right thing, ultimately that will pay out. And by doing the right thing, your results will follow, but they might not be the most primary goal that you have at that given time. And all of these things will build on that trust. And honesty, of course, is another component of that. Right? When we are looking at honesty from a perspective of at the end of the day, you decide, like, when you look in the mirror, it's like, do you stand for your decisions? Do you stand for what you did if you know that it might have not been honest, or you might have made decisions that were, I call it more of a primal state, right? Where you were perhaps acting out of fear, or you were trying to do something that you know will have a negative impact or potentially a negative impact on other people. So there again, it's that integrity, that honesty, and that ties into the third value, which is responsibility. Leadership is a responsibility. It's not a title. It's not an entitlement. It's not I decide over you and I have X number of reports and I tell you what to do. Leadership carries a level of responsibility. And I believe in the corporate world, as we see it oftentimes happening now, that gets mixed up. That ego, that outwardly reflection of power versus we are taking care of everybody within.
Well, you know what has happened globally, and it's our corporate structures. I'll give you an example. Many major corporations have boards of directors. And I've spoken in front of boards of directors. And when we bring up this topic of the values of trust, responsibility, and integrity, and what we're talking about here is responsibility to the employees, right, and to our customers, and being ethical and so on. But when you talk to those boards of directors, you know what they say? Our responsibility is to the shareholders to make as much profit as possible. So I come back with, and I may not use this language, but it's about, do not make money your God. In the future corporate world, you know, we're leaving behind this very archaic dinosaur type of corporation that's being run by a very egotistical human being, right? We're leaving that. It has to go. It's not going to be the corporation government of the future, right? So I just find that the future is really going to be with organizations who do not make money their God. It's about having this balance. Yes, you have to make money. So these boards of directors, if you're listening, please hear this out. This is really vital. That yes, we know you have to make money for your shareholders, but how about the ethics in an organization? Are you willing? Can you go to sleep at night if you are only focused on profits versus on really supporting your employees and creating an ethical workplace that is operated from truth and honesty and trust and responsibility and integrity? We need to make that shift. Comments, Marion, Raj?
Yeah, I've seen that more and more companies are waking up in that, and they are realizing that there are more stakeholders, I call them, that go beyond the shareholders. And I've myself worked for publicly traded companies. And I remember, as I was heading up marketing at the time, I remember these quarterly meetings we had of how are we cutting this and cutting that just to make sure that we are having the results to present to the shareholders. And regardless what needed to happen, we needed to jump through these hoops to make that happen. And the priority were clearly on the shareholders. Since then, I've seen more and more companies actually making somewhat of a shift where they realize that there are more stakeholders in place, where no, it is not all about the primary goal of the money. And make no doubt about that, the results oftentimes they come when you are expanding that view and you are more taking into consideration and account all the other parts of it. When you have more motivated employees and you have hence better performing employees working better together, there's collaboration, there's exchange, there's buy-in, your results will follow. But it is not the primary goal. Yes, so yes. Of course, corporations operate on a profit. If you're not making a profit, you know, your business is at some point out of business. But making that shift and in the approach to say we are relying on our, in this case, employees to be motivated, to be performing, to be collaborative, to be innovative in their ideas, to share with us what is happening in the field. Like the examples, I've been in real estate and construction industries for most of my career. And a lot of it is happening in the field, bringing their opinions in, bringing their feedback in, seeing what works, what doesn't work, makes things so much better, and the results again will follow. But when we start with we put the wagon before the horse, that's when we run into difficulty, and then we are wondering why the results aren't showing.